It seems like everywhere I look in the writing community, I see the word critique. There are websites for critique, there are subreddits for critique, discords for critiques. As someone who is currently writing a novel and keeping it entirely to themselves, I have to stop and ask myself, am I missing out on something useful here? To answer this question, I wanted to dive in head first, so I have submitted the first chapter of my novel all over the internet, and I have received 4 critiques. I have never shown anyone this work prior to today, and I have yet to read the critiques that I have received. So, am I about to find out that my writing is garbage? I hope not, but you know, we'll find out soon, and we'll find out together. A more important and less terrifying thing we'll be finding out though is if the online critique process is something that is useful to both you and I as writers. Let's get into it. Okay, I am pulling up the first critique. I'm blurring out names and pictures and stuff because that just feels like the thing to do. These are split between general comments and line by line edits. We are going to start first with the general comments and then we'll get into the details of it all in the near future. First, general comments are lots of wonderful imagery in this first chapter with subtle world building slid in. Your prose and voice is great. I'm very happy to hear all of that. They go on in the general comments to talk more about specific plot points in the book, but for me to give you guys the context for all of those comments, I would have to read aloud the entire 2,300 words in this first chapter, and I don't think you would stick around for that. So instead, I'm going to just kind of bounce around providing context as I can. So those are the general comments. Let's work our way through the line by line edits, see if there's anything interesting here. Okay, we're looking at the second paragraph right now, and I want to clear up in case it's not totally clear what we're looking at. The text with the white background is the original text. That is what I wrote. The text that is highlighted yellow, also part of the original text, but it's something that the reader, the person critiquing, has highlighted themselves. And then the text with the green background, that is not part of the original text. That is something that the reader, the person critiquing, has added in as a note alongside the original text. Okay, so we know what we are looking at. Let's see what they said. So here I'm setting the scene and they point out that my word choice is a little contradictory. This is actually a good point. We're in a marketplace and the way I word this is merchant stalls ran in long rows separated by stone walkways. A sea of prospective buyers filled the paths, browsing wares, haggling boisterously, and exchanging coin without care. The reader here points out that I use haggling boisterously and then exchanging coin without care back to back, which are two kind of contradictory statements. If you are haggling, then you inherently care about the coin you are giving away, and then I follow up that statement that they are haggling with the proclamation that they're exchanging coin without care. That is a little contradictory, and that's exactly what they say. Exchanging coin swiftly or some variation might work better for you. Haggling is done precisely to make careful use of your money. That it is. They also highlight the word cacophony, saying it's a fun word but tends to be overused. I agree with all of that. I think I'm going to keep it because of the first half of your statement in spite of the latter. I agree, it's probably overused, but it is such a fun word. Such a fun word, cacophony is. So I'm scrolling through right now. There's a lot of little like word choice suggestions, notes here or there about, you might do this, you might do that. But overall positive, overall very encouraging, constructive, a good critique. I appreciate if by some crazy chance you are the person who wrote this critique and you're watching this video, thank you. I appreciate it all. Okay, second critique, same deal. We're gonna look at the general comments first, and then we'll step through and see if there's anything of note in the line-by-line edits. Okay, general comments say, this was an interesting read. Interesting. That can be good. I hope it's like sunset over the mountains interesting and not like car wreck interesting, you know? You've given just enough backstory to set up your story and build the mystery. There was a nice bit of tension and it was well paced. I am so happy to hear all of that. I've made some minor suggestions, but feel free to disregard whatever doesn't work for you. All right, thank you. Let's see what the minor suggestions hold for us. Oh, they like the first line. Good. I wasn't sure about the first line. I know it's going to change a lot before this sees the light of day again, but I liked it enough to keep it for now. The first line is, fear from a distance seems conquerable. And they like this. They said nice and punchy, a good start. This is good. This is a good point. In the 6th, 7th paragraph, we're getting into it a bit. We've introduced the protagonist, Corwin, and then another character steps into view. Well, I'll read you what I wrote and then explain what's wrong with it, what I was trying to do. I wrote, there was a brief hesitation before a boy Corwin's age stepped into view. They wore the same cloth armor and grave eyes. I probably thought myself pretty clever when writing this. You know, sometimes you read a little too much Cormac McCarthy. You think that you can pull off his whole, like, 5 words to tell an entire story level of conciseness. You get a little gutsy with your skill as an author. I think this is what happened with me. So what I was trying to communicate here was that they are both guards. They're both on the same team. That's why they're wearing the same armor. I also wanted to tell that this was a stressful situation for the both of them. I thought I could get this across in one simple line. They wore the same cloth armor and grave eyes. It has now been pointed out to me by this very helpful critique that at the moment it reads as though they are wearing the eyes, as if the protagonist has awoken in the morning and chose from a diverse array, incredible selection of different eyeballs they can rip from a corpse and place into their own eye sockets. That could be a good story. If you want to take it and run with it, then by all means do. That is not the story I am trying to tell, unfortunately. I see where the miscommunication is here. This next note, this is something I've thought about a lot. I write the sentence, "The sun warmed his gambeson until sweat dripped from his black locks of hair, seeping with a chill into deep brown skin." Now, because I'm the type of person to which the doctor might recommend vitamin D supplementation, I know what a gambeson is. With that being the case, I do also understand that that is a bit of subject-specific vocabulary. I'm sort of back and forth on using this sort of vocabulary in my stories because it does very concisely get across the point I'm trying to make. I mean, it is the word for the item I'm referring to. You can't get much more precise than that. But with that being the case, if enough of the readers don't recognize the word, then you kind of lose the benefits you reap from conciseness. I'll have to think about it more. I'm glad they made note of the fact that they didn't know what this word was. Okay, so another overall positive critique. They seemed to like the story. They had a few very solid suggestions. This is good. This is all good. Let's see what the third holds. So third critique, same deal. General comments first, line edits next. The general comments are, so this is off to a very good start. I enjoyed reading this work. You have a good flow to your piece and a good grasp of the characters and the situation in which Corwin has found himself. Corwin is my protagonist. That's awesome. This is good. I had a few edits and suggestions here and there throughout this piece, but overall you are off to a great start. Thank you. This is all very relieving to read. Let's see what those minor suggestions are. I'm actually looking at the edits now. When they said minor suggestions, they meant very minor. It's so minor that I can't really talk about most of them. It's just like maybe apostrophe here, should this be capitalized, like that sort of thing. There is one interesting point though. At this point, we're getting a bit later in the chapter. That child that was acting oddly that I referred to earlier, Corwin has approached them. The child has reached out their hand. Corwin grabs their hand, and some crazy stuff starts happening. Corwin finds himself transported completely elsewhere. It's a very disorienting, very sudden experience. I wanted to communicate that, and this is how I did it. Yet, it was too late. Once Corwin held the child's hand, he found himself unable to let go. A blinding flash. Searing white light filled his vision. The crowd, the market, the clear blue skies once overhead, all vanished in an instant, leaving an endless white void. Now, what this reader did was crossed out the line, a blinding flash. So instead, theirs just reads, he found himself unable to let go, searing white light filled his vision. I see exactly why they did that. Now that I'm rereading this for the first time in quite a while, there's a very obvious redundancy. I back-to-back say, a blinding flash, searing white light filled his vision. There's some subtle difference in meaning there, but not enough, I don't think, to justify the survival of both of those sentences. So I agree with the readers. Something has to go here. One of these sentences needs to get cut. Where I disagree, actually, and not strongly, they may be right, I don't know. But where I disagree here is I don't think a blinding flash was the sentence that should have went. I think the other, searing white light filled his vision, that needs to get cut. This is why. So like I said, what I'm trying to communicate here is an experience that was very disorienting, jarring, very sudden. Sudden is the key. And cutting right to that, a blinding flash, just 3 quick words out of nowhere, that's sudden. There is a jarring element to that. Whereas searing white light filled his vision, there's a sort of gradualness to that sentence. So this is cool that not only a critique can find an issue, but also present a solution to that issue that's an alternative to the one that you might go with or that you might have initially jumped to. They saw the redundancy that I fully agree with, and they think that because of that redundancy that one sentence needs cut, whereas I think that another sentence needs cut. It's cool that there are so many forks in the road when deciding how to tell the same story. But yeah, this critique was good, and I appreciate the comments, but it was also kind of brief, so I don't have a ton more to point out here, which leaves us with the fourth, and potentially the most interesting critique. You'll see. Let's get to it. So the previous 3 critiques were on a website called Scribophile or Scribophile. I don't know how to pronounce it, only how to spell it and type it, but that's where they were. This final critique is on Reddit. I went to the Fantasy Writers subreddit. They allow just open post of work and request for critique. So I did just that. I said, this is chapter 1 of my novel. I would really appreciate just some general feedback. I got only 1 bit of feedback though, which is, you know, it's better than 0. Undeniably so. So the single instance of critique on Reddit went like this. The starting prose is better than most. Better than most. I'll take that. Most seems like a large amount of people. Jokes aside though, that is nice that I think I'm 4 for 4 now on people saying that my prose is not so bad as to impede the telling of the story, because that was probably my main concern throughout the writing process, is that my prose was just, unbeknownst to me, absolute garbage. That's hard to bounce back from. So to receive some reassurance from now 4 different individuals that my writing isn't awful in a technical sense, happy to hear that. That's a win. Celebrations behind us though. This reader comes in with a little bit of a backhandedness in the follow through here after complimenting my prose. They say, even starting with long-winded vague peculiarities. You know, point conceded. I started with a bit of a vague peculiarity. No denial here. I kind of like it. At least he started with telling me my prose was nice. Surely that means that he enjoyed the story overall, right? Smash cut. Next line. Here is where I'm going to get the broom out and smack you with it. You know, when a guy like me signs up to get feedback on his writing and then is soon threatened with violence, with a broom no less, that's a shocking twist, a concerning ordeal. I'm curious to see where this goes. I've read 3 critiques now. I've yet to have been smacked with a broom, so at least we're keeping novelty a factor. Stop trying to hide things from readers. It is difficult to do properly and gives the impression that you feel you are above the readers or trying a tricky reveal under the false impression that they will be happy when you do. Eventually, I kind of figure out what's going on, but you lose me before then. Let me say that I know this first chapter is far, far from perfect. This person could be completely on point. There might be a lack of clarity in this chapter that is harmful to the point that it needs a complete rework. But 3 other people read it right before this person, and they all seemed to like it. They didn't say it was perfect. They didn't say it was, going to be winning awards by the end of the month, but there were no even hints that they had struggled to follow the story, that there was a lack of clarity that was so detrimental that they had to stop reading because I had lost them. There was just none of that. So this smacking of the broom, as this person worded it, is a bit easier to swallow because of the encouragement I had received just prior to reading it. What's interesting, and this is more speaking on the online critique system as a whole, what's interesting to think about is if I would have only posted to Reddit and just stopped there, and this is not an issue with Reddit, just to be clear, this is just, a chance encounter. But if I would have only posted to Reddit, I would have only gotten this single piece of feedback, and I probably would be really considering just scrapping what I had. That is one of the main issues with this system, is that you don't get to pick, nor do you ever really get to know who is on the other side of that critique. Who is it that just read your work and judged your work? I mean, if my great-grandmother would have been handed a copy of Lord of the Rings and asked to critique it, she would have said it was nonsense and she couldn't make it past the first 3 pages. I am not at all comparing my work to Lord of the Rings. I'm not doing that. I'm just trying to make the point that reading, writing, it's a very subjective thing. And who is on the other side of a critique is a very, very important thing to note. I want to back it up real quick. I'm not saying that this fourth critique I got because it was negative, it's inherently bad. Not at all. I do agree that there are points where I am not clear enough in my writing and I need to rework a lot of things. Absolutely. This person probably said more things that were correct than incorrect. I don't know if they said an incorrect thing, except I never did get smacked with the broom. The broom, I'm hoping it's incorrect rather than just like a forewarning, you know? Wasn't saying that is a bad critique because they criticized my writing. I'm just saying that it's worthy to note how completely different their view of the piece was versus the previous three. Cannot be exaggerated how subjective these sorts of things are, and that is the danger of submitting to a website where you might only get 1 or 2 or 3 people to look at your writing. So after all of that, the question at hand, is getting online critique something you should be doing as a writer? Let me answer that question with a slightly different one. Is online critique something that I will continue to take advantage of while I work on my novel? No. For a few different reasons. The first being what I was just rambling about. You don't get a lot of control nor knowledge of who's critiquing your work, which is fairly crucial, I think. Second reason, this is only really useful for your first chapter. There are limits to how much you can submit, not only limits in the software itself or in the website itself, I guess. There's a hard like 3,000 word count limit typically. There's also just limits inherently in how long people will read the work of someone who they're not really interested in. They're just reading it for a critique, you know? So they're not going to read 20,000 words. They're probably going to cap out around 2,500, 3,000, the length of a typical chapter. So that puts a limit on you only submitting 1 chapter. You could technically submit like chapter 14, chapter 28. The issue is the reader isn't going to have any context in the story whatsoever if you just drop them in the middle. If you submit a chapter from the middle of your story, you're going to limit the reader to only critiquing the technical details of your writing. You know, is there a typo here? Is there a questionable word choice there? They can't actually look at the overarching, is your story working? The third reason, and potentially the most important, I think my time and probably your time as well would just be better spent writing. I spent quite a bit of time getting my chapter formatted for these websites, reading other people's critiques to get an idea of what to expect, writing my own critiques to earn my way up the queue so people would critique my work. There was a bit of a time investment to get the feedback that I got. And I don't want to undervalue the feedback I received. It was encouraging, it was constructive. Everyone who left feedback, they did a great job. They were honest, and I appreciate all of it. But I think when looking at the end goal here of creating, finishing, publishing a quality novel, I think my time would have been better spent if I was writing instead of going through this process to receive the feedback I did. That's just the way I see it. There is one situation where I think this process, this online critique thing, is a good idea. If you're in a spot where you are new and you're not confident in your general writing ability, I'm talking just like your prose at a glance, you don't think it's good. If you're in that spot and it is becoming a hindrance to your productivity as a writer, I do think that sending your first chapter to these sites can provide either the encouragement that your writing is good and it's nothing to worry about, or the confirmation that maybe your prose needs a little more work. I do think it's good for that. In conclusion, online critique as a useful long-term writing tool? Probably not. Online critique as a confidence booster if needed? Maybe. I hope this was entertaining and helpful to you in whatever creative endeavor you've embarked on. Thank you for watching.